The ambassador of Botswana, looking at Africa in the right perspective, we want to give you the opportunity to now educate the masses here and tell the entire world, not in this room, outside there, because after we are watching this, you see a lot of students tweeting and getting the message across. Then you know that the power of mass media is powerful. For whatever we discuss here is what people now take as answer. Ambassador Botswana, the floor is yours.
I'm extremely delighted, Mr. Moderator, to be part of the panel discussion today, which is the third of the series of panel discussions that have been organized in this forum. This kind of exchanges allow us opportunities not only to exchange knowledge and experiences, but also perspectives of how Africa goes about responding to development challenges. But I want to just add to what you have just said, Mr. Moderator, that we very much welcome this sort of forum, particularly to help spread knowledge about Africa to the international community. Africa happens to have suffered from many years of negative publicity from the international press. The only thing people remember from the international press about Africa is that it's a continent of wars and conflicts and poverty. But things have changed. Africa is a land of opportunities and challenges, and the world needs to go out there to exploit those challenges and opportunities, and so that we can put the difficult days of negative publicity behind us. You have just rightly said, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Moderator, that Africa has just offered a global citizen in the person of the late Nelson Mandela. That's no mean achievement. If Africa can offer and produce a global citizen of that stature, that's no mean achievement, and we should capitalize on that achievement and the legacy that Nelson Mandela left. Mr. Moderator, it is true that Africa has increasingly taken control of its destiny. It is true that in Africa today, there is a recognition of the need for Africa to increasingly assume responsibility for working out solutions for its own problems. We have now, Africa is almost 50 years after the founding of the OAU, which has since been transformed into the African Union. And 50 years from now going forward, the African Union has come up with Vision 2063, which is aspirational, to project the image of Africa 50 years from now, the kind of Africa that we should see in the next 50 years. An Africa which is peaceful, an Africa which is prosperous, free of disease, an Africa which enjoys peace and security, which is very true. And then in the area of international trade, there is a genuine desire on the part of Africa for Africa to become an important player also in the global economy. As African economies, we are keen to contribute to the global economy and to be integrated into the global economy. That is why, as Africa, we view the Doha round of trade negotiations as extremely important. Now, I want to also make the point that over the last couple of years, most African countries have undertaken genuine reforms of their political and economic systems. In the political sphere, we have seen increasing democratization throughout the African continent. Most African countries have become liberal democracies. Most of them have also, in the economic sphere, they have adopted free market economies and making genuine efforts to improve the living conditions of their people. There has also been massive public investment in infrastructure, in the building of schools, health facilities, and also a genuine effort to improve the living conditions of the poor, and giving particular attention to services such as education, health, and paying attention to the situation of vulnerable groups, especially women and children. We very much commend this, Mr. Chairman. I'm conscious of the time, but let me mention one area where there has been a significant manifestation of the philosophy of Africa's solutions to African problems. This is the area of peace and security, a very fundamental area. Here, Mr. Chairman, Africa has increasingly assumed responsibility for finding solutions to its civil wars, to its conflicts, by using the resources, the opportunities within Africa itself. What we have seen over the last couple of years is that mediation efforts are mainly aimed at supporting the internal parties to the conflict to find a solution to themselves. And the international community comes in to support those efforts. There's been tremendous success in this area. And I can give examples in Africa, in Burundi, represented by my brother at the far end of the table. We have seen this in Liberia. We have seen this in Sierra Leone. We have seen this in the Sudan, which today is two separate countries. We continue to see this in Somalia. This approach of African solutions to African problems has worked very effectively in those examples. There are many other examples, but in the area of peace and security, we have those examples. Now, there is the area of development. Yes, African countries have increasingly assumed responsibility for their development challenges, and these are numerous. What we have seen in this area, taking an example of a small country like Botswana, where I come from, major efforts have been made at a national level to develop infrastructure, to develop the health and education system of the country, with a sizable portion of the budget being devoted towards the social services sector. This is what most African countries are doing. They are devoting quite a sizable portion of their budgets to what matters most, to the mouths of their people. Health, education, women empowerment, and also in recent years, paying increasing attention to the situation of persons with disabilities. Well, let me also say, from the early stages of our independence as African countries, I don't want to talk about Botswana generally, but we relied extensively on official development assistance. It was inevitable that we would do so. But what has happened also over the last couple of years is that many African countries, including Botswana that I have the honor of representing at the United Nations, have transformed the traditional donor-recipient relationship that existed in the early days of independence into partnership. This is what has now happened. You now do not have the traditional donor-recipient relationship in a number of African countries. The way they relate to their development partners is a relationship of partnership and no longer the donor-recipient relationship. Just to give you an analogy of how we have attempted to do it in Botswana in this transformation, how we have tried to effect it in Botswana, is that we have asked our development partners, our donors, to teach us how to fish instead of giving us fish. The philosophy here is that if they give us fish, you have food for the day. But if they teach you how to fish, then you can go out every day, go out to the pond and fish. You have more food for more other days other than a single day. This is one philosophy, Mr. Moderator, that we must carry at the back of our minds. Then the issue of public-private partnership is very important. Many African countries have promoted the concept of PPP as part of their approach to development in order to reduce their dependence on their official, their donors, their traditional donors. One little example I could give, I'm conscious of the time, is that in Botswana, for example, we are just about 45 or so years after independence. One of the challenges that we faced was the HIV/AIDS pandemic. We were one of the worst affected countries in sub-Saharan Africa. And because of that major challenge, the government took a decision to put in a substantial portion of our domestic resources, our domestic budget, into acquisition of antiretroviral therapy to respond to the problem. And that was a significant response to a public health emergency that confronted that. But the government then took this decision that we are going to finance it out of our public resources. We became one of the very first African countries to come up with a publicly funded antiretroviral program, where there were a few sister countries in Africa that were confronted with these challenges ahead of us, but we became one of the very first to deliberately come up with a public funding to respond to the HIV/AIDS, and it's an experience about which we are very proud. Finally, many African countries, just like us in Botswana, similar to the continental vision of 2063, in Botswana we also have a national vision, Vision 2016, which is aspirational. We have a way of looking into the future and seeing where we would like to take our country, what kind of society we would become. We are very eager that in future, in 2016 happens to be the time when we will be celebrating 50th anniversary of our independence. We would like to be a peaceful and prosperous society. And many African countries today have some national visions of some sort, which are aspirational. They project what kind of societies they would like to be. These national visions build on to the continental vision, which I talked about earlier, which is 2063, which is being spearheaded by the African Union Commission. Now, let me conclude by saying, no, we have challenges in Africa. Challenges of poverty. Poverty is number one. It is refusing to go away, even though we have made efforts to tackle it as a number one priority as part of the Millennium Development Goals. It is refusing to go away. We are picking up every little weapon that we can pick up to throw at this problem. But one day we will be able to push it back quite significantly with the support of the international community. There is unemployment as another challenge, particularly amongst our youth. As we have heard, the youth are our future. We need to invest in them, in that they are the very people that we will be relying on to take forward the African continent. Many of our economies are mono economies. We are heavily dependent on single commodities, and we have a very narrow economic base. So the challenge is economic diversification so that we can expand the narrow economic base of our economies. And that is something that we will embark on as future. And of course, there are challenges of climate change. Climate change is quite a challenge in Africa, in that it impacts on a whole variety of activities in life. It impacts on health. It impacts on food and energy security. It impacts on a whole range of whatever we are trying to achieve in our development efforts. So, Chair, Mr. Moderator, let me just go that far. Of course, conscious of the time, and to thank you very much for the opportunity that you have created for us to be in this Ambassador series. And I want to encourage the Peace Institute, together with the Writers Association, Journalists Association, to continue this effort of spreading information about Africa, to try and defray the negative image that the continent has suffered, mainly due to the bad publicity that the continent has had over the years from the international press. And thank you very much, Mr. Moderator.
Yeah, thank you so much, Your Excellency, for this particular contribution you've made. You've enumerated in so many ways issues, problems, and you have looked into the past, the present, and the future, which is very, very good. I just want to paraphrase what he has said because you picked your questions. Now, for what you have used as an example, as a case study, we see that he does not shy away from the issues of problems. He mentioned so many problems that actually confronted Botswana, and he also looked at the global solution and the immediate effect of what we can do to handle our own affairs. Because of time, I know that when the question and answers comes, I will also enumerate some of the things you have said, but for people that have listened to the ambassador of Botswana, you see that this is a very hot debate that comes at the nick of time. And I'm very happy to have beautiful faces here today who are very much willing to contribute their own ideas to this solution. Understanding make outstanding. And that's where we are going. Your Excellency, we want to thank you for this submission you've made, and I believe that we're going to take you on some of the issues. So let's give him a round of applause, please.